Let us journey back in time. We're going to a period we now call the Classical Era. This was a long time ago, stretching from roughly the 8th century BCE to the 5th century CE. It was a time of great change, of big ideas, and of powerful empires. Two civilizations in particular stand out: ancient Greece and ancient Rome. They were not just places on a map, they were vibrant societies that fundamentally shaped the world we live in today. When we talk about democracy, philosophy, law, or even the design of our big public buildings, we are often unknowingly talking about them. Their stories are epic, filled with heroes, villains, wars, and incredible moments of human creativity and thought. Why do we care so much about these ancient people? It is because their world is not entirely lost, it echoes in our own. The Greeks gave us the language to question everything, from the stars in the sky to the nature of justice. The Romans showed the world how to build an empire that lasted for centuries, connecting diverse peoples through roads, laws, and a common administration. They were ambitious, flawed, brilliant, and sometimes brutal. Understanding them is like finding a key to our own past. It helps us see where our ideas about politics, art, science, and how to live a good life first began to take shape on a grand scale. Imagine walking through the bustling streets of ancient Athens. You would hear philosophers debating on street corners. You would see citizens rushing to the assembly to vote on matters of war and peace. Now, picture yourself in Rome, a city of marble and might. You would witness grand processions of victorious generals and see engineers building aqueducts that carried water for miles. This era was not a quiet, dusty period of history. It was alive, dynamic, and full of energy. The people who lived then were just like us in many ways. They loved their families, worried about the future, and sought to leave their mark on the world. So, as we explore these two magnificent civilizations, we are not just looking at ruins and old texts. We are uncovering the very foundations of Western civilization. The stories of the Greeks and Romans are our stories too. They show us the incredible heights humanity can reach and offer cautionary tales about the dangers of power, pride, and conflict. They were the architects of a world that, in many respects, we still inhabit. Their achievements and their failures continue to teach us valuable lessons. This journey into their past is a journey into understanding ourselves and the world we have inherited from them. Ancient Greece was not a single country as we know it today. It was a collection of independent city-states, or polis. Each city-state had its own government, its own army, and its own unique identity. Among these, Athens was a shining star. It was a city dedicated to the goddess Athena, the patron of wisdom and warfare. Life in Athens, especially during its golden age in the 5th century BCE, was unlike anywhere else in the ancient world. It was a place of incredible artistic, intellectual, and political experimentation. For an Athenian citizen, the city was everything. It was their community, their government, and the center of their world. The heart of Athenian life was the agora, the central public space. This was more than just a marketplace. It was where people gathered to discuss politics, do business, and catch up on the latest news. Imagine Socrates walking through the crowds, asking probing questions to anyone who would listen. Nearby, you would find the Nix, a hill where the citizen assembly met to make laws and vote on important decisions. This was direct democracy in action. Every eligible citizen had the right to speak and cast his vote. This level of public participation was revolutionary for its time, creating a society where citizens felt a deep sense of responsibility for their city's fate. However, it is crucial to remember who was considered a citizen. Athenian society was far from equal. Only adult men who had completed their military training were granted the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Women, for the most part, were excluded from public life. They could not vote, own property in their own name, or participate in the political process. Their domain was the home, where they were expected to manage the household and raise children. Slaves also formed a significant part of the population, performing much of the hard labor that allowed the city to function. Life in Athens was bright, but its light did not shine on everyone equally. Despite these limitations, Athenian culture flourished. The city became a hub for artists, poets, playwrights, and thinkers from all over the Greek world. They built magnificent temples like the Parthenon, on the Acropolis, a testament to their devotion and their artistic skill. They invented theatre, with great playwrights like Sophocles and Euripides writing tragedies and comedies that explored the deepest questions of human existence. In Athens, the pursuit of knowledge and beauty was not just a hobby, it was a central part of what it meant to be human. This creative energy made Athens a true powerhouse of the ancient world. The golden age of Athens could not last forever. Its growing power and influence made other Greek city-states nervous, especially its great rival Sparta. While Athens was a naval power with a democratic government, Sparta was a land-based military society ruled by two kings. Spartans were famous for their discipline, their courage, and their formidable army. The differences between these two leading powers created a deep-seated tension that eventually erupted into a devastating conflict. This was the Peloponnesian War, which raged for nearly 3 decades, from 431 to 404 BCE. It was a Greek civil war that pitted Athens and its allies against Sparta and its allies. The war was not a single continuous battle. It was a long and brutal struggle with different phases of fighting. Athens, with its powerful navy, dominated the seas. It could raid coastal towns and protect its trade routes, which brought in vital supplies of grain. Sparta, with its unmatched army, dominated the land. The Spartans would march into Athenian territory, burning farms and trying to lure the Athenian army into a decisive battle. The Athenian leader, Pericles, had a clever strategy: avoid fighting the Spartans on land and stay safe behind the city's long walls, relying on the navy to win the war. It was a clash of two very different military philosophies. Tragedy struck Athens early in the war. A terrible plague broke out within the crowded city walls. It killed tens of thousands of people, including Pericles himself. The plague weakened Athens immensely, both in terms of manpower and morale. Yet the war dragged on. There were periods of intense fighting followed by fragile truces. One of the most disastrous moments for Athens was its Sicilian expedition, a massive military campaign to attack the city of Syracuse in Sicily. The expedition ended in a complete and utter failure. The entire Athenian force was destroyed, a catastrophic loss from which the city never fully recovered. In the end, Sparta emerged victorious. With financial help from Persia, their old enemy, the Spartans built a navy capable of challenging Athens at sea. They finally defeated the Athenian fleet and blockaded the city, starving its people into surrender in 404 BCE. The long walls of Athens were torn down and its empire was dismantled. The Peloponnesian War was a tragedy for all of Greece. It left the city-states weakened, impoverished, and deeply divided. The conflict marked the end of Athens' golden age and created a power vacuum that would eventually allow a new force from the North Macedonia to rise and conquer all of Greece. Even though its political power faded, the legacy of ancient Greece continued to shine brightly. The Greeks left behind a treasure trove of ideas and creations that have shaped our world in countless ways. Perhaps their most important gift was philosophy, which simply means the love of wisdom. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle were not content with easy answers. They asked big questions. What is justice? What is the best way to live? How can we know what is true? They developed logic and reason as tools for understanding the universe. Their work laid the foundation for virtually all of Western philosophy and scientific inquiry. The Greek passion for order and reason was also expressed in their art and architecture. They sought to create perfect forms and ideal beauty. Look at their sculptures. They are not just realistic. They capture a sense of idealized human perfection and grace. Their temples, like the magnificent Parthenon, were built using precise mathematical principles, such as the golden ratio. This created a sense of harmony, balance, and visual perfection. The architectural styles they developed, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders, are still used in buildings today, from government buildings to museums, connecting our modern world directly to the aesthetic ideals of ancient Greece. Another revolutionary concept born in Greece, particularly in Athens, was democracy, or rule by the people. The idea that ordinary citizens should have a say in how they are governed was radical. While Athenian democracy was limited, as we have seen, the principle itself was world-changing. It planted the seed of an idea that government should be accountable to the governed. This concept has been fought for, debated and adapted over centuries, and it remains a powerful ideal in many nations around the globe today. The very words we use for politics, like politics itself, monarchy and oligarchy, all come from the ancient Greek language. And let us not forget the other gifts. The Greeks gave us epic poetry through Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, stories that are still read and loved. They invented historical writing with Herodotus and Thucydides, who tried to explain past events based on evidence rather than myth. They made huge advances in mathematics with figures like Pythagoras and Euclid. They created the Olympic Games, a celebration of athletic competition. In almost every field of human endeavor, from drama to medicine, the ancient Greeks left an indelible mark. Their curiosity and creativity set a standard that continues to inspire and challenge us. As the Greek city-states declined, a new power was growing on the Italian peninsula. This was Rome. According to legend, the city was founded in 753 BCE by the twin brothers Romulus and Remus. For its first few centuries, Rome was ruled by kings. But in 509 BCE, the Romans overthrew their last king, who was seen as a tyrant. They declared they would never be ruled by a king again. Instead, they established a new form of government, a republic. The word republic comes from the Latin phrase, which means the public thing or the public affair. The core idea was that the state belonged to the people. The Roman Republic was a complex system of government with checks and balances designed to prevent any one person from becoming too powerful. Power was shared among different groups and officials. The most important officials were the two consuls, who were elected each year. They acted as joint heads of state and commanders of the army. Having two consuls meant that one could veto the actions of the other, a key safeguard against tyranny. The most powerful governing body was the Senate, an assembly of elder statesmen, mostly from wealthy aristocratic families. The Senate advised the consuls and had huge influence over policy, especially concerning finance and foreign affairs. However, Roman society was initially divided into two main classes, the patricians and the plebeians. The patricians were the members of the old, wealthy, elite families. They held most of the power in the early republic. The plebeians were everyone else, the common farmers, merchants and artisans. At first, the plebeians had few rights and were excluded from holding high office. This led to a long struggle known as the conflict of the orders. Over time, the plebeians organized themselves and used strikes and protests to demand more rights. They eventually won the right to elect their own officials, called tribunes, who could protect their interests and even veto actions of the Senate. This gradual evolution of their political system was a key strength of the Roman Republic. It allowed the state to adapt to changing circumstances and to incorporate more of its population into the political process. The plebeians gained the right to hold any political office, and the laws were written down and made public in the 12 tables, so everyone knew their rights and duties. This created a more stable and resilient society. It was this flexible and surprisingly inclusive political structure that provided the foundation for Rome's incredible expansion, allowing it to govern not just a city, but eventually a vast and diverse territory. The Roman Republic was not content to remain a single city-state. Driven by a mixture of ambition, fear of its neighbors, and a desire for security and resources, Rome began a long and relentless process of expansion. At first, it focused on conquering the Italian peninsula. This was a slow and difficult process that took several centuries. Rome fought wars against its neighbors like the Etruscans and the Samnites. Instead of simply destroying the cities it conquered, Rome often made them allies. It offered them a degree of self-government and sometimes even Roman citizenship in exchange for loyalty and soldiers for the Roman army. This clever policy helped Rome consolidate its power and build a vast reserve of manpower. Once Rome controlled Italy, its ambitions grew. It came into conflict with Carthage, a powerful trading city in North Africa. This rivalry led to a series of 3 massive wars known as the Punic Wars. These were some of the most difficult and dangerous wars Rome ever fought. The Second Punic War is famous for the Carthaginian general Hannibal, who marched his army, complete with war elephants, over the Alps to attack Italy directly. Hannibal inflicted devastating defeats on the Romans, but Rome refused to give up. Its resilience was incredible. In the end, Rome defeated Carthage, destroyed the city, and took control of its territories, becoming the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. With Carthage defeated, Rome turned its attention eastward, towards the wealthy kingdoms that had emerged from the old empire of Alexander the Great. One by one, Macedonia, Greece, and parts of the Middle East fell under Roman influence and then direct Roman rule. Roman legions, highly disciplined and effective fighting forces, were almost unbeatable. Generals like Julius Caesar extended Roman territory even further, conquering all of Gaul, which is modern-day France, in a brilliant but brutal campaign. By the 1st century BCE, Rome controlled a vast territory that stretched from Spain to Syria. The Republic had become an empire in all but name. However, this incredible success came at a price. The expansion brought immense wealth into Rome, but it also created deep social and political problems. The gap between the super-rich and the poor grew wider. Small farms were bought up by wealthy landowners, forcing many farmers to move to the city of Rome, where they became an unemployed and restless mob. Powerful generals with loyal armies began to compete for power, leading to a series of bloody civil wars. The republican system, designed to run a small city-state, struggled to manage a vast empire. This period of turmoil would ultimately lead to the death of the republic and the rise of a single ruler, the emperor. Life in the Roman world was a study in contrasts. At the top of society was a small elite of wealthy senators and equestrians, a business class, who lived in luxurious villas, enjoyed extravagant banquets, and held all the political power. Far below them were the masses of ordinary Roman citizens, many of whom lived in crowded, noisy, and often unsanitary apartment buildings called insulae. The government tried to keep this urban population happy with what the poet Juvenal famously called bread and circuses, free grain distributions, and spectacular public entertainment like chariot races at the Circus Maximus and gladiatorial contests at the Colosseum. The family was the cornerstone of Roman society. At its head was the paterfamilias, the oldest living male who had absolute authority over his entire household, including his wife, his children, even if they were adults, and his slaves. Roman women had more freedom than their Athenian counterparts. They could own property and were active in social life, attending dinners and public games, but they were still excluded from politics. Slavery was widespread and essential to the Roman economy. Slaves worked in mines, on large farms, and in wealthy households. While some were treated well, many lived harsh lives with no rights at all. The Roman army, or the legions, was the engine of Roman power and a key institution in society. It was a professional force of highly trained and disciplined citizen soldiers. Serving in the legion for 20 years was a path to advancement, and for non-citizens from the provinces, a way to gain Roman citizenship for themselves and their families. The army did more than just fight wars. It built roads, bridges, aqueducts, and fortifications across the empire. These engineering marvels helped to unify the vast Roman territories, making it easier to move troops, transport goods, and spread Roman culture. The phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," was quite literally true, as Rome transitioned from a republic to an empire under its first emperor, Augustus. The nature of its government changed forever. The Senate still existed, but real power now rested with the emperor, who controlled the army, the treasury, and the appointment of key officials. This period, known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace, lasted for about 200 years. It was a time of relative stability, prosperity, and order across the empire. Trade flourished, cities grew, and Roman law provided a common legal framework for millions of people. Yet, the question of who would succeed an emperor often led to instability and, at times, violent civil war, a recurring problem for the Roman imperial system. When we compare the ancient Greeks and Romans, we see two peoples who were deeply connected yet fundamentally different. The Romans greatly admired Greek culture. In fact, the Roman poet Horace famously wrote that conquered Greece took its savage conqueror captive. Romans adopted and adapted Greek art, architecture, literature, philosophy, and even their gods. The Roman gods, Jupiter, Juno, and Mars, were essentially the Greek gods Zeus, Hera, and Ares, with new names. Wealthy Romans hired Greek tutors for their children and collected Greek sculptures. In many ways, Rome acted as a vehicle, preserving and spreading Greek culture across its vast empire. However, Their core values and strengths were quite different. The Greeks excelled in the world of ideas and the abstract. They were brilliant innovators in philosophy, mathematics, and democratic theory. They were artists and thinkers who prized individualism and intellectual debate. Their political world was fragmented into competing city-states, and they were never able to achieve lasting unity. The Greeks were pioneers and theorists. They asked why and sought to understand the fundamental principles of the universe. Their focus was often on the ideal, the perfect form, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. The Romans, on the other hand, were masters of the practical. They were engineers, administrators, and lawyers. While the Greeks debated the ideal form of a state, the Romans built a lasting one. Their genius was in organization, administration, and law. They created a legal system that could govern millions of diverse people and built the infrastructure, the roads, bridges, and aqueducts to hold their empire together. The Romans were doers and builders. They took Greek ideas and made them work on a massive scale. Their focus was on order, discipline, duty, and the power of the state. They asked how, and sought practical solutions to real-world problems. This difference can be seen in their contributions. A Greek citizen might be most proud of a brilliant philosophical argument or a beautiful tragedy. A Roman citizen might be most proud of a new aqueduct that brought fresh water to a city or a new law that brought order to a province. The Greeks gave us the questions, the Romans gave us the administrative answers. The Greeks were individualistic and often chaotic. The Romans were communal and highly organized. Both civilizations were essential to the development of the West, but they played very different roles. They were like two sides of the same classical coin, one representing intellectual brilliance and the other representing practical power. The worlds of ancient Greece and Rome may seem distant, but their influence is all around us, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Every time we vote in an election, we are participating in a tradition that began in Athens. The very idea of democracy, of citizen participation in government, is a direct inheritance from the Greeks. Our modern languages are filled with words derived from Greek and Latin. Words like technology, philosophy, and theatre come from Greek, while countless legal, medical, and scientific terms come from Latin. The alphabet I am using to write this, and you are using to read it, is a direct descendant of the Roman alphabet. Look at the buildings in our capital cities. The columns, domes, and arches that we see on government buildings, banks, and museums are inspired by Roman and Greek architecture. They were designed to convey a sense of stability, power, and tradition, just as they did 2,000 years ago. When you watch a movie about a hero's journey, you are often seeing a story structure that was first perfected in Greek epics and tragedies. The legal principle that a person is innocent until proven guilty and the importance of written laws that apply to everyone are foundational ideas that were developed and codified within the Roman legal system. The Romans' engineering feats continue to inspire. Their techniques for building roads and working with concrete laid the groundwork for modern construction. But more than just physical structures, they left us the idea of a large, multicultural state bound together by law, infrastructure, and a common identity. This concept has influenced empires and nations ever since. Similarly, the Greek spirit of inquiry, the relentless questioning of Socrates, and the logical reasoning of Aristotle is the bedrock of modern science and education. The scientific method, with its emphasis on observation and logic, is a direct continuation of this Greek intellectual tradition. In the end, the stories of Greece and Rome are more than just history. They're a guide to understanding human nature. They show us the heights of what people can achieve through creativity, cooperation, and reason. They also serve as a warning, showing how societies can be torn apart by war, inequality, and the corrupting influence of power. They grappled with the same fundamental questions we face today. What does it mean to be a good citizen? What is the nature of justice? How can we create a stable and prosperous society? By studying their triumphs and their failures, we learn more about ourselves and the challenges we face in our own time. Their world is gone, but their echo remains.